The forward operating base hummed with controlled tension until Sergeant Davis's radio crackled with incoming fire reports. "Medical unit, prepare for mass casualties," he barked, doubt clear in his voice about their readiness. The unremarkable woman in standard medical scrubs moved quietly near the triage station when the combat commander's voice cut through chaos with one word that changed everything. The effect was immediate. The medics' supplies scattered across the floor. Senior officers froze at their command posts and faces drained of color throughout the base. No one had expected the combat team to address her as Major. No one had expected the quiet nurse treating routine injuries to receive direct tactical command authority. No one had expected the truth. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story captivated you, please consider subscribing. We share powerful stories of unsung heroes every week. The forward operating base pulsed with the constant hum of generators and muted radio chatter. Banks of monitors cast green light across focused faces, illuminating tactical screens dotted with red threat markers and yellow status alerts. The air carried the scent of diesel fuel and antiseptic, mixed with the tension that came with operating in hostile territory. It was 1,400 hours on what had begun as a standard afternoon shift at Forward Operating Base Delta 9, positioned along the contested border in Afghanistan. Medical Specialist Second Class Sarah Chen stood at her assigned treatment station, deliberately unremarkable in her standard olive-green medical scrubs and regulation aid bag. Her black hair was pulled back in a practical bun, no visible identification except for a basic medical corps insignia. Early 30s, with a composed face that spoke of clinical precision rather than military authority. Her dark eyes moved constantly between patient charts and monitoring equipment, while her presence demanded nothing from the urgency around her. To a casual observer, she might have been any field medic, a recent transfer from stateside medical facilities perhaps, or another face in the endless rotation of support personnel. She occasionally made notes on a standard medical clipboard, her handwriting neat and precise. Unlike the officers and senior staff who filled the base with their command credentials and tactical experience, she wore no visible markers of advanced rank or specialized training. Just a medic, it seemed, with basic clearance and an assignment to handle routine medical support. The current operation involved coordinated patrols through insurgent-controlled territory for intelligence-gathering purposes. The mission had proceeded through standard phases: initial reconnaissance, sector clearing, and now medical standby during final sweep operations before extraction. Operations Sergeant Williams, a veteran infantry leader with something to prove, managed the patrol coordination with practiced efficiency, moving between communication stations and checking status reports throughout the command center. The patrol units had established contact parameters that required careful monitoring, Williams explained to the base commander, his voice carrying across the operations floor. The decision to extend patrol duration created complications for standard medical support procedures. Colonel Harrison sat rigid at the command console, his face a careful mask. A distinguished base commander with 20 years of combat experience, he looked somehow troubled in his desert camouflage, as if the weight of the ongoing operation had physically aged him in recent weeks. Sarah watched it all, her expression revealing nothing. Only the occasional glance toward the main tactical displays suggested any emotional response to the developing situation. When the base commander called for a medical status update, heads turned in mild surprise as Sarah raised her hand slightly from her position at the triage station. Specialist Chen has been monitoring casualty preparedness, Operations Sergeant Williams announced. She may have additional assessment of medical readiness. She moved toward the main command area with a deliberate precision that seemed at odds with her medical support role. Something about her bearing, spine straight, steps measured, attention focused, caught the notice of a grizzled master sergeant seated near the communications array. He frowned slightly, studying her with newfound interest. Colonel Harrison, sharp-eyed and methodical, watched her with narrowed attention as she prepared her medical assessment. The colonel was known for his no-nonsense approach to base security and operational protocols. Today, he wore his authority like a burden, his uniform crisp despite the afternoon heat. "Please state your medical findings for the record," instructed Colonel Harrison. "Medical Specialist Second Class Sarah Chen, Trauma Response Specialist," she replied. Her voice was soft but clear, her her professional bearing perfect. Operations Sergeant Williams began his questioning, and Sarah's responses were factual and precise, but delivered in such a measured, quiet tone that Colonel Harrison soon grew visibly impatient. Several times, the operations recorder had to ask her to repeat her statements. Specialist Chen, Colonel Harrison finally interrupted. The entire command team needs to hear your medical assessment clearly. Please speak up. Yes, Colonel, Sarah responded, barely raising her volume. Operations Sergeant Williams continued. Specialist Chen, can you explain your assessment of our medical readiness status? I've been conducting standard preparation procedures and monitoring casualty projections according to established medical protocols, she replied, her voice still frustratingly soft. I've identified several factors that affect medical response capability based on current patrol parameters. And what were your findings during preparation procedures? I determined that medical supplies respond normally to standard trauma scenarios. I also noted significant resource patterns that indicate potential tactical considerations. Did you document these observations? Yes, I logged all supply levels and attempted capability analysis through available medical specifications. Was this analysis reviewed by command staff? It was not forwarded beyond my immediate medical supervisor. The base security officer, Captain Robert Torres, approached for additional questioning with a skeptical demeanor. Tall and imposing with crew-cut hair that lent him an air of authority, he moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to challenging questionable medical assessments. Specialist Chen, what specific combat training qualifies you to analyze tactical medical considerations? I completed basic trauma response during my medical specialist certification program. And what level of combat experience? His tone suggested the answer would confirm Chen's limitations. I maintain appropriate experience levels for field medical support work, Sarah responded evenly. Captain Torres smiled thinly. Specialist Chen, how could you possibly understand the complexities of combat medical support and tactical protocols when you've been assigned here for only 6 weeks? Something flickered across Colonel Harrison's face. A brief shadow of recognition quickly suppressed. He studied Sarah more intently now. Objection to characterization, Operations Sergeant Williams called out. Specialist Chen's medical assessments should be evaluated on merit. Sustained, Colonel Harrison replied, his eyes never leaving Sarah. Captain Torres adjusted his approach. Let me rephrase. What specific experience do you have with combat medical operations in hostile environments? Sarah paused before answering, her eyes briefly meeting those of the grizzled master sergeant near the communications array. My background includes some practical application of trauma response analysis, she said carefully. Could you be more specific? That information involves previous deployments that may not be relevant to current medical requirements. Captain Torres looked to the base commander. Colonel, if the specialist lacks relevant experience with combat operations, her medical assessments should be considered accordingly. I'll allow the line of questioning, Colonel Harrison ruled. Specialist Chen, please provide more detail about your relevant experience. Sarah's expression remained neutral. My previous medical experience involves classified military programs. How convenient, Captain Torres remarked dryly. So we're expected to trust your tactical assessments without knowing your actual qualifications to evaluate combat medical operations? I'm reporting on medical observations I made using established trauma protocols. As the questioning continued, Sarah responded with increasingly precise details about combat medicine, tactical protocols, and operational procedures that made. Several senior officers on the base exchanged glances. She referenced specific trauma techniques, evacuation procedures, and medical command structures that seemed beyond the knowledge base of a standard field medic. When shown tactical medical diagrams, her eyes lingered on them a moment longer than necessary, her composure wavering almost imperceptibly before returning to professional detachment. Do you recognize these medical protocols, Specialist Chen? Captain Torres asked. Yes, they represent the trauma procedures I've been preparing for casualty response. And your analysis of these protocols proved to be, what exactly? The medical observations you made about tactical readiness. How does that affect current operations? Sarah's voice remained steady. The medical analysis I conducted indicated trauma protocols that weren't reflected in current tactical evaluations. My observations about readiness standards were documented in my medical reports. On the base, The older master sergeant with multiple deployment patches watched Sarah with growing intensity, his brow furrowed in concentration as if trying to place a half-remembered voice from operational briefings. The afternoon hours passed as Operations Sergeant Williams returned for follow-up questions, asking Sarah about specific medical requirements for the current mission. Can you explain the standard protocols for supporting a combat patrol of this nature? Williams asked. The command team would have established primary and secondary evacuation procedures with medical oversight, she explained, her voice still frustratingly soft. Standard protocol requires verified trauma capabilities and clearance confirmation at predetermined tactical levels. And if those procedures were insufficient or compromised, the backup medical response would proceed using alternative treatment methods after primary care was evaluated, utilizing specialized trauma protocols on confirmed combat casualties, she explained with a level of tactical precision that raised eyebrows among the command staff present. Colonel Harrison leaned forward, his patience visibly wearing thin. Specialist Chen, I've asked you repeatedly to speak up. This command center cannot properly evaluate medical assessments. It cannot hear clearly. I apologize, Colonel, Sarah replied, her volume barely increasing. The older master sergeant at the base now sat forward at his monitoring station, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. Recognition seemed to be dawning slowly, his expression shifting from curiosity to something closer to alarm. Captain Torres seized on the colonel's frustration. Perhaps Specialist Chen's reluctance to speak clearly reflects her limited confidence in her own medical assessments. Operations Sergeant Williams stood immediately. Sir, that's inappropriate speculation. Noted, Williams, Colonel Harrison replied sharply. Captain Torres, confine your remarks to relevant questions for the specialist. Captain Torres nodded in acknowledgement. Specialist Chen, in your assessment as a medical professional, was there anything about the patrol planning that indicated modified medical requirements? Sarah looked directly at the main tactical display for the first time. The medical assessment suggested trauma modifications beyond current protocol estimates. That wasn't my question. Based on what you observed, should medical procedures have been modified? Based on the casualty patterns I identified, yes. But my assessment was not included in operational planning. Captain Torres's expression hardened. Are you suggesting that medical information was deliberately ignored by command staff? I'm stating that the trauma analysis I provided differed significantly from the medical assessment that was distributed to operational personnel. The base stirred with murmurs. Colonel Harrison tapped his pen once against his desk, restoring order. Specialist Chen, Colonel Harrison said, his voice tight with growing impatience. You'll need to explain that assertion clearly and audibly for the command staff. What specifically was different about your analysis? Sarah paused, her eyes scanning the command center briefly before returning to the colonel. When she spoke, her voice remained soft, forcing everyone to lean forward to hear. My trauma analysis indicated that the patrol routes included casualty scenarios using medical protocols normally reserved for special operations units. That information was not included in the medical briefing provided to operational personnel. Colonel Harrison's head snapped up, his carefully maintained composure cracking for the first time. The grizzled master sergeant's expression darkened as he studied Sarah with new intensity. Specialist Chen, Colonel Harrison said firmly, frustration evident in his tone. This is the final time I will ask you to speak louder. The entire command staff must be able to hear medical assessments accurately. Sarah looked directly at Colonel Harrison. A look of quiet recognition passed between them, though the colonel quickly masked it with professional detachment. The veteran master sergeant at the base was now gripping his monitoring station, his knuckles white. Colonel Harrison finally interrupted with visible impatience, leaning forward at his command console. Specialist Chen, we don't have all afternoon. Speak clearly or we'll proceed with operations without additional medical input. The command center fell silent. For the first time since beginning her assessment, Sarah looked directly at Colonel Harrison. A look of quiet recognition passed between them, though the colonel quickly masked it. The grizzled master sergeant near the tactical display leaned forward, his hands gripping his monitoring station. Suddenly, enemy mortar fire erupted across the base perimeter, and alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Over the radio, a combat team leader's voice crackled. Base command, we're taking heavy fire and need immediate tactical support. Major Chen, Your call on medical evacuation routes. The effect was immediate and electric. Colonel Harrison's pen fell from his fingers, clattering loudly on his desk. Several command staff physically straightened at their workstations, as if witnessing something impossible. Captain Torres's face drained of color. The grizzled master sergeant near the tactical display stood up involuntarily, then slowly sat back down. Complete silence fell over the command center as recognition dawned across various faces. Some looked confused, others shocked, and a few, those who understood the significance of what they had just witnessed, appeared stricken. Sarah continued in her normal soft voice, but now everyone was straining to hear. That radio call recognizes my rank because I was the lead medical officer for the 75th Ranger Regiment before my unit was deployed on a classified mission 2 years ago. I was also the tactical medical advisor attached to Operation Silent Thunder, which Colonel Harrison personally commanded before today's patrol began. She methodically produced a worn, waterproof document case from her medical bag and held it up for the command staff to see. This contains classified operational records from Operation Silent Thunder, not the sanitized reports filed with base command. These patrol routes aren't just reconnaissance missions. They're based on intelligence I developed before my unit was declared Kia and my commission was officially terminated. Colonel Harrison attempted to call for order, but found his voice failing him. Specialist Chen, this is highly irregular procedure for medical assessment. My unit and I were declared casualties during Operation Silent Thunder, Sarah continued calmly. I was the only survivor. I've spent 2 years working under assumed identity and waiting for another mission to utilize the same tactical patterns, not for personal reasons, but to prevent other soldiers from being endangered by compromised intelligence protocols. A younger communications officer near the radio terminals looked up in confusion. This is impossible. Major Chen died in a classified operational incident. I processed casualty reports myself. The grizzled master sergeant turned to address him. Stay at your station, soldier, he said quietly. Look at that tactical response. Combat teams don't address deceased personnel by rank. Sarah opened her document case to reveal operational plans, personnel records, and classified documentation. My unit was eliminated because we discovered General Patricia Walsh was facilitating intelligence transfers to enemy forces through a network of compromised informants, the same network that provided the false tactical information leading to my unit's destruction. The command center erupted into controlled chaos. Colonel Harrison tapped his pen repeatedly on his desk, finally restoring some semblance of order. His face had lost all color, and his hand trembled visibly. This base will pause current operations for 30 minutes, he declared, his voice unsteady. But before anyone could move, Sarah spoke again. With respect, Colonel, this patrol route contains the same intelligence vulnerabilities that destroyed my unit. I've waited 2 years to speak. But current operations are proceeding with compromised intelligence that could endanger American lives. Colonel Harrison slowly leaned back in his chair, his authority visibly shaken. He nodded once, a gesture of reluctant permission. Operation Silent Thunder was classified above top secret, Sarah continued. Our mission was to establish secure patrol routes that could operate without risk of enemy detection. We created intelligence protocols and tactical measures that represented the most advanced reconnaissance available. What we discovered was that General Walsh was providing our operational specifications to enemy forces through a sophisticated espionage operation with tactical records linking directly to insurgent commanders. She turned her document case and removed an encrypted data drive. This contains patrol plans, intelligence algorithms, and tactical protocols. We transmitted this evidence before we were compromised. That transmission was intercepted and our forward position was destroyed. Our unit was left to die. Captain Torres stood, his voice hollow. I received direct confirmation from General Walsh that Silent Thunder Team had been confirmed Kia. The operation was terminated due to security breach circumstances. We weren't dead, Sarah said simply. We were very much alive and calling for immediate extraction. I heard your voice on the command frequency, Captain Torres. You sounded confused, but you relayed the termination order. Operations Sergeant Williams approached Sarah cautiously. Major Chen, if what you're saying is true, how did you survive? And why assume a false identity for 2 years? Sarah's composure never wavered as the base remained under enemy fire. I survived because I was separated from my unit during the final assault on our position. I was wounded, unconscious, presumed dead along with the others. Local allies found me and kept me hidden while I recovered. By the time I was functional again, the official story was established. My unit was dead, the operation had been compromised, and General Walsh had been promoted to regional intelligence oversight. She looked around the command center, meeting the eyes of several senior staff members. I needed time to gather evidence that couldn't be easily buried again. I needed to understand who knew about the intelligence transfers and who was simply following compromised orders. Most importantly, I needed to make sure no other soldiers would die because of the same security failures that destroyed my unit. The grizzled master sergeant approached the central command area. Colonel, request permission to address the command staff. I am Master Sergeant Frank Rodriguez, Special Forces. I was the tactical liaison for the Silent Thunder operation. He turned to face Sarah. Major Chen was one of the finest medical officers I ever served with. If she says her unit was betrayed, I believe her without question. Captain Torres interjected. This is all highly dramatic, but it has no direct bearing on current patrol operations. Reconnaissance missions proceed according to established tactical protocols, not some conspiracy from years ago. They're connected, Sarah replied as the enemy fire continued around them. The intelligence being used here includes the same tactical vulnerabilities from Silent Thunder that enemy forces exploited. Current operations are proceeding with compromised specifications. History repeating itself. Different mission, same betrayal, same source. She pulled another document from her case. This is an intelligence summary showing that my unit reported security vulnerabilities directly to General Walsh 6 times before our position was destroyed. We were told explicitly that questioning tactical protocols would compromise critical operations. We weren't being paranoid. We were trying to protect American lives. Colonel Harrison studied the document, his command demeanor cracking further. These security reports weren't included in the tactical briefing I received for today's patrol evaluation. Because they were deliberately removed, Sarah said, just like current intelligence assessments are being modified to hide ongoing information transfers. And just like the evidence was removed from Operation Silent Thunder after my unit was eliminated, the command center had grown absolutely still despite the continuing enemy fire. Every person present was aware they were witnessing something extraordinary. Even the communications operators had stopped their routine monitoring, staring at Sarah with undisguised astonishment. Operations Sergeant Williams approached the command console. Colonel, in light of this new intelligence, I recommend immediate review of patrol routes and potentially aborting current operations pending security assessment. Colonel Harrison nodded absently, his attention still fixed on Sarah as the base remained under attack. Granted, all patrol operations will implement enhanced security protocols immediately. He paused, then added, Major Chen will remain under protective custody until these matters are resolved. As staff began coordinating the operational changes, Sarah spoke again. There's something else you should know, Colonel. She removed a final document from her case. This is the original authorization for Operation Silent Thunder with your signature from when you served as regional commander. And this, she produced another paper, is the termination order that condemned my unit. The authorizing signatures don't match. Colonel Harrison took both documents with trembling hands. Someone forged my signature on the termination order, he whispered, shock evident in his voice. Yes, Sarah confirmed. You've been carrying responsibility for a decision you never made. The termination order came directly from General Walsh's office. The veteran Master Sergeant Rodriguez moved closer. I always questioned why you would terminate that reconnaissance operation, Harrison. It didn't align with anything I knew about your tactical integrity. Colonel Harrison looked up, visible emotion crossing his face. I've spent 2 years believing I made a call that ended crucial intelligence work and contributed to my unit's death. I authorized the operational liaison, but I never authorized abandoning them to die. The base communications crackled, and a team of military investigators appeared at the main entrance, led by a stern-faced senior officer. What is the meaning of this tactical alert? The officer demanded through the intercom. Colonel Harrison, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Foster from the Criminal Investigation Command. We received an anonymous intelligence package yesterday containing evidence of serious breaches of operational security involving General Walsh and information transfers. I understand there may be connected evidence being reported at this base. Sarah smiled faintly as the enemy fire continued. Right on schedule, she murmured. Lieutenant Colonel Foster's voice came through the intercom. You would be Major Chen, formerly of Silent Thunder. I would be. We have extensive questions for you, Major. Starting with how you survived and why you assumed false identity. And I have answers, Lieutenant Colonel Foster. 2 years' worth. The officer's voice continued through the base communications. Colonel Harrison, with your permission, I'd like to take custody of the evidence Major Chen has provided and arrange for her protection pending a full investigation. Colonel Harrison nodded toward the intercom. Granted, but I want to be kept fully informed of any evidence relating to current operational security and potential intelligence compromise. Of course, Colonel, it appears several ongoing operations have been compromised by the same source. The command center began to clear of non-essential personnel as security protocols allowed, but Captain Torres remained at his monitoring station, looking shell-shocked. Sarah approached him quietly while the base remained under partial lockdown. I don't understand, Torres said, looking up at her. Why would you risk exposure? I'm the one who relayed the termination order that left your unit to die. Because you were another victim of the same intelligence compromise, Sarah replied simply. You followed what you believed were legitimate orders from a trusted superior. The guilt should rest with those who manipulated you, not those who were deceived. How can you be so certain I wasn't involved? Sarah allowed herself the smallest of smiles, glancing at the tactical systems still responding to her presence. Because I've spent 2 years studying every detail of what happened. I know who facilitated the intelligence transfers and why. I know who altered tactical reports and who profited from the information sales. Most importantly, I know you requested confirmation twice because you suspected something was wrong with the termination order. Captain Torres's eyes widened. How could you possibly know that? Those communications were classified. I had help, Sarah admitted. Not everyone in military intelligence was compromised. There are still good soldiers within the system who wanted the truth to come out and who wanted to prevent other units from dying because of security failures. As she prepared to leave with Lieutenant Colonel Foster's team, the veteran Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached as security protocols began to normalize. Major, he said formally, then dropped his voice. Sarah, we held a memorial service for the Silent Thunder team. I spoke about your dedication to protecting American lives. I know, she replied quietly. I read the transcript online. Thank you for honoring their sacrifice. What happens to current operations now? Sarah looked at the tactical displays showing current patrol positions. Now they proceed with honest intelligence assessment and proper vulnerability testing. American lives can be protected because someone finally told the truth about information transfers. The command center remained suspended in a moment of shocked revelation as tactical systems gradually returned to normal. Colonel Harrison slowly stood from his command console and removed his rank insignia, setting them on his desk before stepping down to stand on the same level as Sarah. This base recognizes Major Sarah Chen, presumed killed in action, recipient of the Bronze Star with Valor, he announced formally, his voice carrying a weight of regret and respect. The veteran Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached Sarah and rendered a respectful salute. Others throughout the command center followed suit, a ripple of silent recognition spreading through the room. Personnel who had moments ago regarded her with skepticism now stood at attention, honoring a fellow soldier whose integrity had cost her everything. Captain Torres, visibly shaken, stood to address Sarah directly. I never knew who actually gave that termination order. I've been carrying this responsibility for 2 years, believing I contributed to ending important intelligence work. I know, Sarah replied. Your voice on the command frequency that day. I heard your confusion. You questioned the order. Twice, Torres confirmed, his voice breaking slightly. They told me I was risking operational security by questioning administrative decisions, that the intelligence concerns had been addressed through other channels. Colonel Harrison's professional demeanor cracked as he turned to face the command staff. I authorized Operation Silent Thunder Liaison based on reconnaissance intelligence that indicated critical tactical applications. I did not authorize the termination order that ended the operation. The signature was forged. You've been living with responsibility that was never yours to bear, Sarah confirmed. General Walsh used your command authority to cover her own intelligence transfer activities. Lieutenant Colonel Foster's team finally gained full entry as security protocols normalized. Colonel Harrison, I'd like to request a formal suspension of current patrol operations while we secure this evidence and establish proper protocols for what happens next. This has implications for multiple ongoing missions and potentially dozens of personnel. Colonel Harrison nodded. Current operations will continue with enhanced security protocols, but all reconnaissance intelligence will be immediately reviewed for potential compromise. He paused. Captain Torres, in light of the evidence presented, you are relieved of any responsibility for the Silent Thunder incident pending complete review of the circumstances. As military investigators began securing the base and escorting people to debriefing areas, Sarah opened her document case and carefully displayed photographs showing General Walsh meeting with known enemy contacts and intelligence brokers. This was never about recognition, she said softly, addressing the command center at large. It was about preventing other soldiers from dying because of intelligence compromise, and about making sure military operations serve American interests rather than enemy forces. As she descended from the command area, her shadow stretched long behind her across the center floor, the shadow of a major standing at attention rather than a medical specialist checking supplies. For a moment, she paused to look back at the tactical displays showing current operational status. The command staff was coordinating with proper intelligence information for the first time in years. Colonel Harrison was directing missions with restored confidence in his tactical systems. Captain Torres was working to identify other potentially compromised operations. Master Sergeant Rodriguez watched her from near the command console, his face reflecting a complex mix of pride and determination. Sarah gave him a small nod before continuing toward the exit with Lieutenant Colonel Foster's team. Her mission wasn't quite complete. There would be extensive debriefings, military investigations, and probably congressional oversight. The full scope of the intelligence transfers would need to be exposed, and those responsible held accountable at every level. But the most important part was accomplished. The truth was out, and soldiers could once again trust that their intelligence systems were working to protect American interests rather than serve enemy forces. As she reached the command center exit, a military police officer approached. Major Chen, Lieutenant Colonel Foster has arranged secure transportation for your continued protection. If you'll come this way. She followed the officer toward the exit, conscious of the eyes following her progress. Command staff, communications personnel, security officers. For 2 years, she had lived invisibly, unremarkable and unnoticed, gathering evidence while pretending to be a routine medic. Now she walked openly, her rank restored, her purpose fulfilled. The older veteran caught up with her just before she reached the exit corridor. Major, he said quietly, what you did, surviving, maintaining your cover, gathering evidence, coming forward at the right moment, it was extraordinary. I had a duty to my unit and to the soldiers who came after us, she replied simply. It was more than duty, he insisted. It was courage of the highest order and intelligence work of a quality that protected American lives. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. You taught us well, Master Sergeant Rodriguez. I taught you procedures and protocols, he corrected. What you demonstrated today, that came from within. He watched her leave with the investigative team, then turned to Colonel Harrison, who had joined them. Some heroes never get the recognition they deserve, he said quietly. They just carry the weight of protecting others. Colonel Harrison nodded, watching Sarah's figure disappear down the corridor. And some truths are worth waiting years to hear. The afternoon light continued to strengthen as Sarah's escort vehicle pulled away from forward operating base Delta 9. Behind her, the base buzzed with renewed purpose as military operations moved forward with proper intelligence protocols and adequate security assessment procedures. The command staff worked with restored confidence, knowing their missions would proceed without enemy intelligence interference. Ahead lay the challenge of ensuring complete justice was served and that the full scope of the intelligence transfer network was exposed and dismantled. But for now, in this moment between what was hidden and what would be revealed, the simple act of speaking truth had transformed a routine medical assessment into something profound. The power of one soldier's quiet determination to honor fallen comrades and protect national security, even when it meant sacrificing years of her career to gather the evidence necessary to expose betrayal that powerful forces had tried to maintain forever. As her vehicle reached the main gate, Sarah's radio crackled with an update from the base. All security protocols have been restored to maximum classification. Investigation proceeding with full military oversight. Sarah closed her eyes and smiled for the first time in 2 years, knowing that this time, American lives would be protected by honest intelligence rather than compromised by enemy operations.